Eureka, Grade 2, Module 3, Lesson 16. Compare two three-digit numbers using less than, greater than, and equal. Welcome back. I'm glad you're here for another math lesson today. Before we begin, there are a couple of items you will need to get. First, you're going to need your whiteboard. You will also need your dry erase marker. You may pause the video now to get these items. Press play when you're ready to keep going. For math today, we're going to be comparing numbers. When we compare numbers, we look at the quantity or value of one number and compare it to the quantity or value of another number. Let's review our place value discs. Here's a green place value disc labeled 1. The value of this place value disc is that, 1. Remember, it takes 10 of these to make one of the next greatest unit. Do you remember the next greatest unit after 1? If you said 10, you're correct. 10 ones will make one group of 10. The value of the yellow place value disc is 10. It's worth 10 individual ones. When we have 10 groups of 10, we have enough to make one of the next largest unit. Do you remember the next largest unit after 10? 100. 10 groups of 10 will make 100. The value of the orange place value disc is 100. That means that it's the same as 100 ones, or 10 groups of 10. On this place value chart, we keep our units together. Ones, tens, and hundreds. That helps us stay organized and also keeps all of those place value discs with the same value together. As we work our way to the left, the value of the discs increase. That means they're worth more. On this place value chart, the disc with the least value is 1. Then we have tens, and the disc with the largest or greatest value is 100. That's going to be important today as we compare numbers. When you're comparing numbers, it's wise to look at the unit that has the greatest value. Check that out first, because you'll know usually which number is worth more by starting with the unit that has the greatest value and then working your way down to the unit that has the least value. Here are some math symbols that we need to review that will be important for us today. This symbol is the equal symbol. We use this symbol when two numbers are equal or equivalent. That means they have the same value. This is the greater than symbol. We use this symbol when one number is greater than another. That means one number has a higher value than another. This is the less than symbol. We use this symbol when a number we're comparing to is less than or has a lower value than another number. We're going to start by representing the number 74 with place value discs. In the number 74, we have 7 tens and 4 ones. Let's start by adding 7 tens. Count with me. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 tens. We also need 4 ones. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's how we represent 74 in the place value chart. We're going to compare this number to another. We use tens and ones to comprise this number. Let's take a look at the number we'll be comparing to. The number is 174. Hold up! You may have noticed that there are some similarities. In the number 174, there's also 7 tens and 4 ones, just like 74, which had 7 tens and 4 ones. We can go ahead and add that to the place value chart below 174. The two charts right now look the same, equal or equivalent. But we do have a digit here, 1, that has value. That one represents one group of 100. 174 has 100, 7 tens, 4 ones. 74 only has 7 tens and 4 ones. Remember, when we're comparing numbers, let's look to the unit with the greatest value first to know which number is larger or greater. Can you tell which number is greater, 174 or 74? If you said 174, you're correct. Remember, 174 had a group of 100. 74 did not. So when we look to the hundreds place value spot on the place value chart, we can tell that this number is greater or has a higher value because it has this group of 100. 74 does not. We would say 174 is greater than 74. Let's compare these two numbers using our math symbols. Remember, less than, greater than, equal to. We read it like this. 174 is, would we say less than 74? Greater than 74 or equal to 74. If you said greater than, you're correct. 174 is greater than 74. The opening on this symbol is large, facing the largest number. 174 is the greater number, so the larger opening on the symbol will face toward that number. It's the largest. Let's look at 105. In the number 105, we have 100 and 5 ones. Now, we're going to compare this number to 135. Let's look at 135. You may have noticed that there are some similarities. In 105, we had 105 ones. In 135, we also have 105 ones. There is a difference. Did you notice that 135 also had 3 tens? That's right. There are 3 tens in the number 135. 100, 3 tens, 5 ones makes the number 135. In 105, we only had 100, 0 groups of 10, and 5 ones. Can you tell by looking at these two place value charts which number is less than the other, or which one has the least value? Remember, start by comparing the largest unit, which would be 100s. Now, when we look at that, we can tell that both 105 and 135 have one group of 100. In that way, they're equivalent or equal. Let's move to the tens place. If you look, 105 does not have any groups of 10. 135 has 3. That means that 135 has a greater value. The number is larger or worth more than 105. We would say 105 is less than 135. Let's compare these two numbers using our math symbols. 105 is less than, greater than, or equal to 135. Which symbol would you use? If you said less than, you're correct. We would write the symbol less than in between the numbers 105 and 135 when they're written in this manner. We read it 105 is less than 135. Remember, the greater opening on the symbol will point toward the larger or greater number, the number with the greatest value. I have already represented 257 and 250 on place value charts. Let's look at 257. We have 2 groups of 100, 5 groups of 10, and 7 ones. This is how we model 257. Over here I have 250. 2 groups of 100, 5 groups of 10, and 0 additional ones. This is how we model 250. Let's compare these two numbers. Let's start by looking at the largest unit. On our place value chart, the greatest unit is hundreds, so let's look there first. 257 has 2 groups of 100. 250 also has 2 groups of 100. We cannot tell which number is greater or which number is less by looking at just the hundreds because they're equal or equivalent. They both have 2 groups of 100. Let's move to the tens place value spot. In 257, there are 5 groups of 10. In 250, there are 5 groups of 10. These two numbers are equivalent or equal in that sense. They both have 5 groups of 10. We still can't tell which number is greatest by stopping there. Let's go to the next unit, which would be our ones. 257 has 7 ones. 250 has 0 additional ones. That group of 7 ones increases the value of 257 and makes it greater than 250. We would say 257 is greater than 250. Let's compare those two numbers using our math symbols. We have 257, would we say is less than 250? Greater than 250, equal to 250. Which symbol would you use? If you said greater than, you're correct. 257 is greater than 250. We would write the symbol greater than between those two numbers. It shows that the value of 257 is greater than the value of 250. Now it's your turn. You're going to get a chance to do some activities with me. Before we begin, let's review how we draw place value discs. If you want to draw a place value disc with the value of 100, you would first write the number 100. Then you'll draw a circle around it. Remember, you're not coloring these, you are just labeling them. We'll know the value because it will be labeled, and it doesn't need to be perfect. When you want to draw a place value disc with the value of 10, you'll write 10 and draw a circle around it. We'll know the value because it's labeled 10. When you want to draw a place value disc with the value of 1, write the number 1, draw a circle around it, and we'll know the value because it's labeled 1. Here are two place value charts. You're going to take a turn. I want you to represent 316 with place value discs, and I want you to represent 361 with place value discs. On your whiteboard, draw 316 and 361 using place value discs. When you're finished and ready to keep going, press play. Let's check your work. Let's first look at 316. In 316, we have 3 groups of 100, 110, and 6 ones. You should have drawn it like this. 3 groups of 100, 110, and 6 ones. 316. Check your work. Did you get 316? Let's look at 361. There are 3 groups of 100, 6 tens, and 1 1. Let's draw that. 3 groups of 100, 6 tens, and 1 1. Remember, we can draw the 10-frame way to help keep all of our place value discs organized. Once you have a column of 5, start on your next column of 5. We have now drawn 316 and 361. Hopefully you were able to draw this exact same thing on your whiteboard. Let's compare these numbers. Let's begin by looking at the largest unit, or the unit with the greatest value. That's our hundreds. In 316, we have 3 groups of 100, and in 361, we have 3 groups of 100. We can't tell which number is greater or which number is less than just by looking at the hundreds because they're both equal or equivalent in the amount of hundreds they have, 3. Let's go to the next place value or next unit. It's tens. In 316, there's 1 group of 10. In 361, there are 6 groups of 10. We can now tell the number with the greater value just by comparing the amount or the groups of 10. In the number 361, there are more groups of 10 than in the number 316. That means that 361 is greater than 316. It's the larger number. It has the greatest value. Let's compare 316 to 361 using our symbols. Remember, this symbol is less than, this symbol is greater than, and this symbol is equal to. I want you to pause the video now. I want you to write 316 and use one of these symbols to compare it to 361. When you think you've chosen the correct symbol, press play and let's check your work. Okay, here we go. 316, is it less than 361? 316 is greater than 361, or 316 is equal to 361? If you chose less than, you're correct. You should have used the symbol less than. Remember, 316 has less or fewer groups of 10 than 361. That means that it has a smaller value. It's less than 361. Here's another opportunity for you to represent some numbers with your place value discs. I have 472, 274, and 724 written above place value charts. We're going to pause here. Press the pause button. I want you to represent each of these numbers on your whiteboard using place value discs. When you have represented each of those three numbers using your place value discs, press play and we'll check your work. Here we go. Let's start with 472. We model 472 with our place value discs by drawing 4 groups of 100, 7 groups of 10, and 2 ones. 472. Now, let's take a look at 274. We model 274 with 2 hundreds, 7 tens, and 4 ones. Now, these two numbers do have something in common. They're using the same digits. But remember, the value of the digit depends on its location or place in the number. The further you go left, the greater the value of the digit, because our units increase in value as we work to the left, both on our place value chart and in our numbers when we write them in standard form. So even though they're using the same digits, the digits don't have the same value because they're in a different place when we write them in standard form. Let's take a look at 724. In 724, we have 7 groups of 100, 2 tens, and 4 ones. Take a minute to check your work. Were you able to represent each of these numbers using place value discs? If you need to pause the video and compare, you can. This would be a great time to do that. Now, we're going to take these numbers that we have represented in place value discs and answer some questions. The first question I want you to answer is which number is greatest? Remember, we can compare numbers by looking at the units, starting with the largest unit. Today, the largest unit we're working with is hundreds. So look at the hundreds place value in each of those numbers. Can you tell which number is the greatest? I want you to pause the video. Figure out which number is the greatest and then press play. All right, now that you've had a chance to think, let's look at the hundreds place value in each of these numbers. 472 has 4 groups of 100. 274 has 2 groups of 100. 724 has 7 groups of 100. Can you tell which number has the greatest value or the biggest number because of the amount of hundreds it has? If you came up with 724, you're correct. 7 groups of 100 is much larger than 2 groups or even 4 groups of 100. That makes 724 the greatest number. Let's look at another question. Which number is least? We can still figure this out by looking at the units. I want you to pause the video and figure out which 3 of these numbers has the least value. And when you're ready, press play and let's see what you came up with. Let's take a look at our units again, starting with our hundreds. 472 had 4 groups of 100. 274 had 2 groups of 100. And 724 had 7 groups of 100. We know that 724 is the greatest. We're looking for the least, or the number with the smallest value. That means we want the number that has the smallest amount of hundreds. Were you able to figure out that 274 was the number with the least value? Because it has the fewest groups of 100, 274 has the least amount of value. Last question. I want you to write the numbers in order from least to greatest. I want you to pause your video. On your whiteboard, I want you to write these 3 numbers in order from least to greatest. Remember, least is the number with the smallest value. Greatest is the number with the greatest value. When you're ready to check your work, press play. Okay, let's start with the number that has the least value. Remember, we circled it in yellow. It's the one that had the fewest groups of 100. 274 was the number that had the least value. It had the fewest groups of 100. Looking at the numbers that are left, we're comparing 472 to 724. Again, look at the units. Can you tell which number is the next smallest number? Would it be 472 or 724? If you had 472, you're correct. 4 groups of 100 has a lower value than 7 groups of 100, so it would be the next smallest number. That leaves us with only one number left, and that number is our greatest number. 724. It has 7 groups of 100, making its value the greatest out of all 3 of these groups. Woot woot! You did great! That was a great math lesson. I'm so glad you were here to join me. Whoa. Wait a minute. You mean we're not finished? What does this even say? Let's read this together. Use the symbols less than, greater than, and equal to compare the numbers. Okay, we just did this, so I'm pretty sure I can do this. Let's start with the first one. 247, and we're comparing it to 281. This large oval is where we can write the symbol to make this statement true or accurate. 247, is it less than, greater than, or equal to 281? Remember, we can start by comparing the units. Even if we don't have them drawn out in place value discs, we can still look at the place value of the digits. Because remember, even when a number is written in standard form, the value of the digits increase as we work our way to the left. So looking at the far left, the value of these digits is the hundreds value. So they both have 2 groups of 100. That makes them equal or equivalent in that way. That means we need to go to the next place value spot, which is tens. 247 has 4 groups of 10. 281 has 8 groups of 10. I can tell that 281 has more groups of 10. It means that that number is greater or has a larger value. So now I need to decide what symbol I would place between these 2 numbers to make this statement true. 247, is it less than 281, greater than 281, or equal to 281? If you said less than, you've got it! It had fewer groups of 10, making its value less than the value of 281. Remember, the larger opening on this symbol is going to point toward the larger number, or the number with the greatest value. I think I'm a little stumped on the second question. 703? In words? I do remember that we talked about the different ways we could represent numbers, all the different ways we could write them. Standard form, unit form, expanded form, word form. Wow, there are a lot of ways to represent numbers. I need to compare them, but how do I compare words to digits. Do you have any ideas? I think I just came up with one. Even though 703 is written in word form, I know that I can represent it in standard form. I'm going to write it below the words so that I remember what it's worth. 703. I write 703 with 703. 703. Now I can compare these two numbers, 703 and 703. Would I use less than, greater than, or equal to compare these two numbers? If you said equal to, you're correct. 703 and 703 are equal or equivalent. The value of these numbers is the exact same. We would use the equal symbol when comparing those two numbers. Now, our very last question is written in expanded form. 300 plus 60. Remember, even though it's in expanded form, I can still write it in standard form. I have to think, what is 300 plus 60? That's right, it's 360. I wrote it in standard form so it would be easier for me to compare these two numbers. I have 360 and I'm comparing it to 306. Now I can look at the different units to see which one has a greater value. Well, they both have three groups of 100. So in that way, they're equivalent or equal, which means I need to go to the next smaller unit, which is tens. 360 has 6 groups of 10. 306 doesn't have any. That means that 360 is greater. It has more groups of 10, making the value of 360 greater than the value of 306. What symbol would I use? Would I say 360 is less than, greater than, or equal to 306? If you said greater than, you're correct. Remember, the larger opening on the symbol is going to point toward the larger number. We know that 360 is greater or larger because it had more groups of 10 than 306. You did great today. I'm so proud of the way you were able to compare numbers. Now it's your turn to get even more practice. Head back to Seesaw and you're going to get to compare numbers using less than, greater than, and equal to back on Seesaw. Bye!